Good day to all of you. I am Najiha Samporna. In this video, I will be discussing about the English language media in the Philippines by Dayag, 2008. This paper explores the evolution of English language media in the Philippines amidst the rising prominence of Filipino. It contextualizes this development within key historical events spanning from pre-World War II to the present. It also provides an overview of linguistic studies on Philippine media and suggests avenues for future research. Mass media. Mass media are a potent vehicle for informing, entertaining, and shaping public opinion, and are also a rich source of data on how a language develops and how society uses a language or languages. So, the significant role of mass media in informing, entertaining, and influencing public opinion, especially in democratic societies like the Philippines. It emphasizes the power of media, demonstrated by its role in the ousting of Presidents Marcos and Estrada. It also underscores the importance of mass media as a linguistic resource, particularly in multilingual countries like the Philippines. So, as what Gonzalez and Alberta's example, they illustrate the importance of mass media as a key source for studying Philippine English. They emphasized the role of media, including the radio, television, newspapers, and magazines, in providing linguistic data that could contribute to the standardization of Philippine English. A brief history of English language Philippine media. The establishment of English language media in the Philippines coincided with the American colonization era, starting with the founding of the Manila Times by Englishman Thomas Gowan in 1898. So this marked the beginning of a significant era in the Philippine journalism. Subsequently, other English language newspapers such as the Manila Daily Bulletin, the Herald, and the Tribune emerged, further expanding the media landscape. By the outbreak of World War II, these newspapers had become pivotal in shaping public opinion and disseminating information across the country, so they played crucial roles in reflecting and influencing societal dynamics during this period of transition and upheaval. The American period also witnessed the emergence of weekly magazines, providing additional avenues for communication and expression. So these publications contributed to the proliferation of English language content and helped solidify English as a dominant language in Philippine media. The period of liberation from Japanese imperial forces saw the proliferation of English language newspapers. So, in this era, it marked a significant proliferation of English language newspapers in the Philippines alongside established American newspapers such as Yank, Daily Pacifican, Stars and Stripes, Free Philippines, and condensed versions of Time and Newsweek. A notable emergence of small newspapers occurred. Small newspapers. So many of these small newspapers had previously operated as underground periodicals during the Japanese occupation and now competed with the more established broadsheets. Like for instance, they include the Philippine Press, the Chronicle, Comet, Cory, Express, Filipino Observer, Phil American, Freedom, and Guerrilla, which renamed Star Reporter. So this surge in English language newspapers during the liberation period reflects the dynamic media landscape of the time, where various publications vied for readership and shaping public opinion during this transitional period in Philippine history. On September 21, 1972, President Ferdinand Marcos issued Proclamation 1981, placing the entire Philippines under martial law. During martial law under President Ferdinand Marcos, the Philippine media faced severe restrictions and censorship. Proclamation 1081, issued on September 21, 1972, placed the entire country under martial law, leading to a crackdown on press freedom. It leads to a crackdown on press freedom, because Mijares vividly described this period as one where the intellectual lights went out. It symbolized the suppression of fundamental rights. Critical newspapers like Manila Times, Daily Mirror, and Manila Chronicle were closed, their owners and journalists arrested or silenced. Marcos transferred media ownership to his relatives and cronies, consolidating control over major outlets like ABS-CBN under Ambassador Roberto S. Benedicto. The dictatorship utilized censorship, manipulation through press releases, and arrest of prominent media figures to stifle dissent and maintain control over information flow. As Mijares' claim highlights the gravity of situational, depicting a deathly journalistic silence enforced by Marcos' military might. So, the martial law period under Ferdinand Marcos was indeed characterized by severe thought, control, and suppression press freedom. So in 1977, opposition leader Senator Benigno S. Aquino Jr., who himself had a background in journalism, highlighted the death of freedom of the press under martial law, lamenting the dominance of media outlets owned or controlled by the Marcos Romualdez family and their cronies. As you can see here, it read in part, freedom of the press as we knew it, the people's right to know, the very bedrock of democracy, died with that martial law. That is the closing statement of Aquino before he was killed. Now let me explain. Aquino's closing statement, published as the testament from a present self, emphasized the erosion of the people's right to know and the decline of democracy with the imposition of the martial law. He pointed out that only media outfits aligned with the Marcos regime were only allowed to operate effectively, controlling the flow of information and suppressing dissent. As Mijares described, the martial law period became an era of thought control, where the Marcos regime exercised not only the arrest, detention, and coercion of media practitioners, but also the manipulation of news stories through press releases, shaping public perception and suppressing opposition voices. So, the suppression of press freedom during martial law took two forms. The first one is the direct means, such as arrest, detention, and closure of media establishments, as well as the indirect manipulation of news stories through press releases, which critics dubbed as praise releases. Despite these measures, some Filipinos acquiesced to Marcos' rule, at least in the early years of martial law, highlighting the effectiveness of the regime's propaganda and censorship tactics. Despite the official lifting of martial law by Presidential Decree 2045 on January 17, 1981, the atmosphere of fear persisted in the Philippines due to the continued existence of repressive decrees and the enactment of new laws aimed at suppressing dissent. So one such example is the Public Order Act and the National Security Code, which allowed for the punishment of media personnel based solely on suspicion of writing subversive publications or disseminating false information. So this created a climate of intimidation and censorship, inhibiting press freedom even after the formal end of martial law. So although these laws were eventually repealed in 1983, the cause of press freedom remained hindered by the continued enforcement of Presidential Decrees 1834 and 1835. So this decrees empowered Marcos to issue preventive detention actions, or PDAs, previously known as Presidential Commitment Orders, and arrest, search, and seizure orders, allowing for the arbitrary detention of individuals without due process. So despite the official end of martial law, the legacy of repression lingered on through legal mechanisms that stifled freedom of expression and perpetuated a climate of fear among journalists and media personnel in the Philippines. In the early 1980s, mounting human rights violations, media crackdowns, and economic hardships fueled growing discontent with the Marcos administration in the Philippines. This dissatisfaction gave rise to a demand for fair, balanced, and objective reporting by the media, leading to the emergence of the alternative press, derogatorily dubbed the Mosquito Press by Marcos Information Minister Gregorio Sendanya. Alternative newspapers like Malaya, Mr. and Ms., the WHO, Business Day, Kabayan, Philippine Times, and the Guardian field the void left by the government-controlled press, which often presented biased and censored information. The assassination of Marcos' political rival, Senator Benigno Ninoy Aquino Jr., in August 1983 further galvanized support for the alternative press, with new publications like Malaya, Philippine Science, Veritas, La Solidaridad Filipinas, Mr. and Ms. Supplements, and Periodico Libre emerging to provide fair and objective reporting on the national tragedy. As public support for the alternative press grew, calls for boycotting government-controlled media intensified. Meanwhile, Marcos faced increasing opposition as the anti-Marcos movement gained momentum, with the alternative press playing a crucial role in disseminating information critical of the regime. The pivotal year of 1985 saw the founding of two influential alternative broadsheets, which is the Philippine Daily Inquirer and the Philippine Star. Their establishment coincided with Marcos' announcement of a snap presidential election, which ultimately led to his downfall. So these newspapers, along with the other alternative publications, served as the unofficial media arm of the opposition campaign, providing critical coverage and contributing to the momentum that propelled Corazon C. Aquino, the widow of Senator Aquino, to challenge Marcos in the election. The EDSA People Power Revolution on February 25, 1986, marked a historic turning point in Philippine history, ending 14 years of repression under the Marcos dictatorship and restoring fundamental freedoms, including freedom of the press. The peaceful uprising resulted in the ousting of Ferdinand Marcos and the installation of Corazon C. Aquino as the first woman president of the Philippines. In her pursuit of justice and accountability, one of President Aquino's initial actions was the issuance of Executive Order No. 1, which established the Presidential Commission on Good Government, or the PCGG. So this agency was tasked with recovering the alleged ill-gotten wealth amassed by the Marcoses during their time in power. So as a part of this effort, properties including media outfits were returned to their rightful owners. For instance, ABS-CBN, the radio TV complex acquired by Ambassador Roberto Benedicto during martial law, was returned to the Lopez family. Other media stations and newspapers that had been controlled by the Marcos cronies were sequestered to prevent the dissipation of resources while undergoing litigation. So this process of sequestration and restitution played a crucial role in reclaiming assets and restoring accountability in the aftermath of the Marcos dictatorship, including in the realm of the media ownership and the press freedom. The restoration of democracy and freedoms in the Philippines following the EDSA People Power Revolution led to a surge in the number of national broadsheets and tabloids. Throughout the late 1980s and 1990s, several new publications emerged, reflecting the newfounded freedom of expression in the country. So in 1986, Manila Standard was founded, followed by the establishment of Today in 1993 by Teodoro Locsin Jr., the son of the late Teodoro Locsin Sr., founder of the Philippines Free Press. So this period witnessed significant growth in the newspaper industry, with the number of dailies increasing from 12 in 1986 to 27 in the late 1980s, according to Maslow. Maslow characterized the post-EDSA Philippine press as free, rambunctious, sensational, free-willing, proliferating, exciting, and oftentimes reckless, sometimes irresponsible. So this description reflects the vibrant and dynamic nature of the media landscape during this period, with publications exploring new boundaries and pushing the limits of journalistic expression. So the next one is the profile of the English language media in the Philippines. So the first one is the print media. These statistics reveal a significant contrast in readership between newspapers and magazines in the Philippines. While 29% of the entire population reads newspapers, only 10% read magazines. In Metro Manila, where access to media is more prevalent, 38% read newspapers compared to the 18% who read magazines. The lower readership of magazines compared to newspapers may be attributed to various factors, including the rise of information technology and the increasing popularity of television as a source of both information and entertainment. With the advent of digital media, more Filipinos may prefer the convenience and immediacy of television over printed publications for accessing news and content. Despite the differences in readership, both newspapers and magazines remain important mediums for disseminating information and shaping public opinion in the Philippines, albeit with the varying degrees of influence across different segments of the population. As Table 1 provides an overview of the newspaper landscape in the Philippines, indicating the presence of 8 broadsheets with national circulation, 3 business newspapers, and 1 sports newspaper. Additionally, there are 16 tabloids circulating in the market, including 11 morning and 5 afternoon editions. So this brings the total number of national newspapers to 28, a significant increase compared to the martial law years when only a few pro-Marcos periodicals were allowed to operate. Despite the increase in the number of newspapers, the combined circulation remains relatively low, with approximately 5.5 copies sold. So this accounts for roughly 7% of the total population of 75 million. It's worth nothing that this circulation figure includes tabloids, which are not reflected in Table 1. However, despite the increase in the number of newspapers, circulation figures have not seen significant improvements since earlier estimates. For example, in 1980, the claimed total circulation of national newspapers was 4.4 million. Maslog observed that while there are more newspapers available, circulation remains limited, particularly outside of the Metro Manila area. So this suggests that the While there is a diverse range of newspapers available in the Philippines, circulation remains constrained, indicating potential challenges in reaching a wider audience beyond urban centers. The Philippine Daily Inquirer holds the top spot among the 8 broadsheets, followed by the Philippine Star and the Manila Bulletin. So this ranking is consistent with surveys conducted by independent polling firms such as the Networks Marketing Consulting Group in 1995 and Asia Research Organization in 1999, as cited in Dayag 1999. So these surveys have consistently placed either the Star or Bulletin in the second spot. It's worth noting that all 8 broadsheets use English as their primary language, reflecting the linguistic preference in the segment of the print media market. In contrast, only 2 out of the 16 tabloids, namely the People's Journal and Issue, are in English, while 2, the Tempo and Ang Bagong Diaryo, use a combination of English and Filipino. Business and sports newspapers exclusively use English also. In terms of magazines, 48% are weeklies and 37% are monthlies, with a total circulation of 4.3 million. In terms of magazines, 48% are weeklies and 37% are monthlies, with a total circulation of 4.3 million. Among the 4 Sunday supplements, Philippine Panorama has the widest readership, followed by Sunday Inquirer, Star Week, and Campus. The top 5 magazines of general interest in terms of total circulation are the Philippine Graphic, Miscellaneous, Mirror, Mr. and Miss, and the Miss Vanity, according to the Philippine Media Factbook in 2000. However, it is important to note that these statistics do not include data for the Philippine Free Press, the oldest magazine in the Philippines. Female-oriented magazines account for around 1.5 million of the total number of magazines in circulation, with 15 titles in this category. The top 5 titles based on circulation figures are Woman Today, Mood Magazine, Maria Clara Today, Chick, and The Woman's Journal. Male-oriented magazines consist of 3 titles, with Men Zone ranking first in circulation, followed by Man Magazine and Bond. There are 6 teen-oriented magazines ranked as follows based on circulation figures: Teen Magazine, Super Teen, Teen Friends, Candy, Teen Cosmo, and Cosmo College. Specialty magazines include 2 titles also: the Glitter Magazine and the WT Celebrity Recipe, with Glitter claiming a larger circulation. Lastly, the sports magazines comprise 5 titles, with Sports Weekly having the highest circulation, followed by Sports Flash, Sports Zone, New Sports Life Weekly, and NBA All-Star Weekly. So these rankings provide insight into the preferences and interest of magazine readers in the Philippines across the various demographic groups and interest. The distinction between broadsheets and tabloids in terms of language is clear, with broadsheets predominantly using English, while tabloids may use a combination of English and Filipino. However, when it comes to magazines in the Philippines, English appears to be the dominant language across almost all publications. So this indicates a consistent linguistic preference among magazine readers in the country. In addition to national newspapers and magazines, the community press also plays a significant role in the Philippine media landscape. According to Maslow, there were 310 community newspapers in 1988, including 10 dailies, 220 weeklies, and 37 bi-monthlies. So, the majority of these community newspapers were published entirely in English, or a combination of English and the local dialect. So, in addition to these local publications, foreign magazines also have a significant readership in the Philippines, like the popular international magazines such as The Time, Newsweek, Far Eastern Economic Review, and Issue Week are widely read in the country, reflecting the globalized nature of media consumption in the Philippines. Philippine television has experienced remarkable growth since its commercial inception in 1953, becoming the primary mass media vehicle in the country. With the widest audience reach across all socio-economic households in urban areas nationwide, television holds a significant presence in Filipino households. In Metro Manila, which serves as the nation's seat of power, ownership of TV sets is widespread across different socio-economic classes. For instance, 99.4% of Class ABC, 94.8% of Class B, and 73.8% of Class E households own TV sets. In terms of TV households, Class AB accounts for 102,000 homes, Class C1 holds 112 homes, Class C2 holds 290,000 homes, and Class D holds as 994,000 homes, and Class E holds 333,000 homes. So these labels represent socioeconomic classes in the Philippines, with Class A representing the upper class, B and C the upper and lower middle class, and D and E the low-income group. At the macro level, nearly 10 million homes throughout the country own TV sets, constituting 71% of the total 13.8 million households. Among the regions, Metro Manila has the highest percentage of residents owning a TV set, followed by Luzon, Mindanao, and Visayas. For free TV, there are 6 VHF channels available to Filipinos, providing extensive coverage across the entire Philippines and in Metro Manila as shown in the table 4. In terms of cable TV, there are over 60 channels available, with approximately 900,000 households nationwide subscribing to cable TV services. Data on cable subscription by socioeconomic class in Metro Manila show that 55% of Class AB, 33% of C1, 18% of C2, and 4% of D households are subscribers. The 3 major cable operators servicing the populace are Sky Cable, Home Cable, and Destiny Cable. Sky Cable, formerly owned by the Sky Vision of the Lopez family, and Home Cable, previously owned by the Mediacast Holdings Incorporation, merged in April 2001. Sky Cable has approximately 576,479 subscribers, while Home Cable has 236,765 subscribers nationwide. Data for other cable operators are not available. However, by the end of 2001, the number of subscribers for Sky and Home Cable was expected to decrease due to decision of the Satellite Television Asian Region Ltd. to pull out popular channels like ESPN, Star Sports, Star Movies, Channel, and Viva Cinema for the 2 leading cable operators. This decision was attributed to unpaid fees worth millions of dollars, although Sky and Home Cable denied these acquisitions. Among Metro Manila residents, HBO and CNN are the most watched channels across socioeconomic classes on cable TV. The 3rd and 4th spots are occupied by MTV and ESPN among affluent families, and ESPN and Discovery among less affluent homes. Regarding language usage on VHF channels, 65% of programs are in Filipino, 34% in English, and 1% in Chinese. Late-night news programs, once predominantly in English until the early 1990s, have transitioned to straight Filipino newscasting, presumably to gain mass appeal. Conversely, on UHF channels, 80% of programs are in English, 19% in Filipino, and 1% in Chinese. On cable TV, 99% of shows are in English or foreign languages, with only 1% in Filipino. Moving on to the radio. Radio maintains a high penetration rate in the Philippines, with 87% of households owning a radio set nationwide and 94% in Metro Manila. Across socioeconomic classes in Metro Manila, radio ownership is widespread, with 100% of Class AB, 95% of Class C, and 84% of Class D households owning radio sets. While AM remains the dominant radio format nationwide, Metro Manila demonstrates a higher FM listenership, with 73% of listeners turning in to FM compared to 27% for AM. This trend is also observed in other key cities such as Cebu, Davao, and Baguio, where FM listenership exceeds that of AM. Data in Table 5 indicates an almost equal distribution of AM and FM radio stations in the country. Table 6 illustrates the distribution of radio stations according to type of service. Commercial radio stations are owned by companies such as ABS-CBN, GMA7, Manila Broadcasting Company, and ABC5. Government stations funded by taxpayers' money are managed by the Philippine Broadcasting System under the Office of the Press Secretary. Religious stations are operated by various religious denominations, including the Catholic Church, Iglesia ni Cristo, El Shaddai, and Protestant groups like the Baptist Church. Here is the summary and discussion of the salient findings from the survey. From the surveys conducted on print and broadcast media in the Philippines, several salient findings emerged. Firstly, despite the rise of Filipino as the national lingua franca, English continues to dominate the print media landscape. Respectable broadsheets and magazines predominantly use English, with only tabloids and comic books utilizing Filipino. So, this observation remains consistent with studies conducted over previous generations, indicating that English maintains its stronghold in Philippine print media. In contrast, broadcast media show a shifting trend towards the use of Filipino television and radio stations. particularly on the AM band, exhibit a considerable contraction of English programming in the rapid expansion of Filipino content. This shift is evidenced by changes in program formats, such as the popularity of Mexican telenovelas dubbed in Filipino and the transition of primetime news broadcast from English to Filipino. Television talk shows and soap operas also predominantly feature Filipino content, contributing to the proliferation of the language on airwaves. While cable TV channels predominantly use English, their impact is limited due to low subscription rates. On radio, AM stations in Metro Manila primarily use Filipino, while provincial stations often broadcast in the vernacular or regional languages. FM stations, traditionally English-dominated, are gradually incorporating more Filipino content into their programming. Overall, while English remains prevalent in print media, the broadcast landscape is witnessing a shift towards increased usage of Filipino. So this dynamic reflects changing preferences and demographics within the Philippine media landscape, highlighting the evolving role of language in shaping media consumption habits. The linguistic research conducted in the Philippine media can be broadly categorized into two strands. Firstly, studies aimed at describing Philippine English at phonological, syntactic, and discourse levels have been conducted using data from the Philippine media. Alberca and Gonzalez conducted pioneering research on the phonological features of Philippine English based on data from radio and television. So these studies, along with others, contributed to establishing an inventory of sound features associated with Philippine English phonology. Second, research has focused on describing discursive practices and strategies across various genres of Philippine media. Studies by Gonzalez have highlighted three styles of discourse in Philippine English: the formal, the informal, and familiar. The formal style is characterized by complex sentences, while the informal style features short and simple sentences. The familiar style incorporates code switching between Tagalog and English. Additionally, studies have described grammatical properties of Philippine English based on written media text, identifying features such as lack of subject-verb agreement, faulty article and preposition usage, and tense aspect usage. To conclude, these studies provide valuable insights into the linguistic characteristics of Philippine English as manifested in media discourse, shedding light on both phonological and grammatical aspects, as well as discourse styles and strategies employed in various media genres. And now, the future directions of this paper. First, in keeping with efforts towards cross-linguistic and cross-cultural research, more investigation is needed of genres of media discourse within the constructive rhetoric framework. In addition, despite the number of studies conducted on advertising language, the genre of advertising is still a promising area for research. Studies of advertising discourse may utilize the stylistic, semiotic, and genre approach. Furthermore, with the proliferation of broadcast interviews on radio and television, it might be good to study this genre in order to account for a number of issues, say the relationship between language and gender, the operation of the politeness principle, the multifunctionality of questions asked in these interview programs, and the like. And finally, apart from using descriptive approaches to the study of media discourse in the Philippines, such as those presented above, there may also be a need for a critical approach to the linguistics of media. Philippine mass media provide a fascinating laboratory for studies in critical linguistics, discourse analysis, social linguistics, pragmatics, and a range of other linguistic research. This paper offers a comprehensive overview of the English language media in the Philippines, tracing its history and profile across various platforms. The incorporation of major political events provides a contextual backdrop, enriching the narrative. Highlighting the diversity of language in Philippine media and its implications for linguistic research is particularly insightful. The coexistence of English, Filipino, and regional languages opens up avenues for exploring language content phenomena and linguistic dynamics. Indeed, Philippine mass media serve as a fertile ground for studying critical linguistics, discourse analysis, social linguistics, pragmatics, and other linguistic disciplines. By delving into media discourse, researchers can unravel complex sociocultural, political, and ideological dimensions embedded within text. So this paper contributes to a deeper understanding of Philippine media discourse and sets a promising direction for future research in linguistic studies.